Hey guys, some people have been asking about our opinion on the last couple sets of tires that we use. So today I wanted to do a little review on the Cooper Discoverer ST Maxx, specifically the 255/85/16 tire. And that's what we most recently had on our truck. We abused it all over the Western United States and the Pacific Northwest. So we got to use it in varied terrain. If you're new to the channel, I feel like it's important to give you some of my background. Not trying to brag or anything. I just want people to know whose opinion they're getting. I started off-roading in the mid-90s. By the late 90s, a buddy and I built a race car. We'd raced Baja 1000 type stuff. We've continued to do that ever since. I've been teaching people how to winch, patch their tires, pick line choices off-road, manual transmission driving since about 2008. And do some military training for different Special Operations Command units. And then in about 2018, my wife and I quit our jobs and tried to explore the most remote places we could in our Land Cruiser through Central and South America. Now we're back in the United States, getting ready to leave again. This set of tires specifically was used on a 1990 HDJ80. That's a Toyota Land Cruiser, a diesel version with a Maltec conversion done to it. So essentially what that means is it's got a big box on the back. The weight of the truck is about 6,500 pounds fully loaded, and it's about a 60-40 rear bias weight distribution. I feel like it's kind of important to tell you how we use the tires, just because my experience on that truck is going to be different than somebody using it on, say, an FJ40 or something really lightweight, or somebody putting it on their Earth Roamer that could be double the weight of our Land Cruiser. So that's me. That's sort of how we use the tire. We were working for a company that maps trails, so we were all over the Western United States, and initially we used these Cooper Discovery ST Maxxes in sand dunes and sort of volcanic sharp desert of Nevada. I was shocked at how well it did in the sand. So one of the first high points of the tire is how well it did in the sand. It has sort of a rounded profile, unlike some of the other 255/85 size tires. And that rounded profile, I feel like, helped it not dig into the sand. Additionally, it doesn't have too aggressive of a tread pattern, and that also helped us get some flotation, I think. This tire's diameter is sort of on the smaller side of the 255/85/16s. It's 32.8 inches in diameter, so almost a full 33 inches, and it's 10.2 inches wide, and it weighs in at 58 pounds. So of the available tires of this size, compared to the BF Goodrich, it's about the same height. It's a little bit shorter. I think the BFG is, let me cheat and look at BFG's site. Let's see, 33.1. And then the Toyos, which is actually what we have on that same truck right now, again, the 255/85, is 33.5. So really that Toyo versus the Cooper is significantly taller, and it weighs, let's see, 61 pounds. So it's significantly taller and significantly heavier, the Toyo is, than the Cooper. And we immediately noticed that when we made the change. The taller tire made it feel like we had re-geared the truck to a different gear ratio. Now it's only half an inch, so it wasn't massive. It's just enough that you could tell. We noticed that the truck took a little more effort to get up to speed and to brake, with the Toyos being heavier and taller. So another plus to these Coopers is that for the size, they're relatively lightweight. And like I said, in the sand, we found that they were having a much better time floating than the other more aggressive mud terrains we've used, like a KM3 and a Toyo mud terrain. The second point is I thought that they would have trouble with some of the volcanic rock we were off-roading through. So 6,500 pound truck's not super heavy, but it's definitely not light either. And with our auxiliary tank full, a lot of that weight was on the rear tires. We did have a little bit of chunking, and I took some photos of that I'll share here. But in general, it really wasn't that bad, considering we were going over lava rock, igneous rock that had pretty sharp knife edges and would shred up just about any tire. So it was more chunking than I wanted to see on a set of tires that was relatively new. But we never got any flats, we never had any sidewall punctures, and when we did change the tires out before we headed for Alaska, there really wasn't any massive cuts in it down to the belting that would make you worry that you were going to get a flat in the near future. So the tires held up reasonably well, I would say. Something that was my experience with a set of tires that may or may not be true for all Coopers, is that as they aged and we were in the very dry desert west, the rubber compound did seem to dry out. When the tires were first on the truck, when we first bought it, I'm guessing that they were a little bit more pliable, and through all of the time and the heat and the aging of the tire, and it was a couple years old, I feel like the tire compound may have been drying out a little bit. So that may have contributed to some of the chunking. Like I said, again, it wasn't massive. It's just when a tire chunks, there's less surface area. So not only does it get noisier and get rougher riding, but of course it's not going to last as long because there's not as much rubber there for the load of your vehicle to be sitting on. So the rubber that's left is going to, of course, wear away more quickly. This tire, when we aired it down, was very pliable. So most 255/85, if not all, are load range E. And that just means that they have a lot of sidewall belting and they're set up and they're approved to have a certain load be put on them, okay? So with these being load range E tires, when you air them down, you might have to air them down a little further than a comparable load range C tire. If you could buy the exact same tire in two different load ranges, you'd see one being more pliable than the other. Now, the load range E might mean that it is tougher and it does resist sidewall punctures more, but it also means when you air down, it's going to resist sort of splaying the tire out and getting that nice increased contact patch and surface area that you want when you air a tire down. These Coopers, as soon as we aired them down to 18 PSI, we were mapping some trails in the sand dunes, and there were some sand canyons behind this sort of sand dune play area, and the truck had no troubles going through it. A couple of times we dug into the sand. We didn't even have to use Maxx tracks. We were able to just back out of it and take another run at the hill we were trying to make. But I was really impressed with these Coopers in the sand. On-highway manners was also similarly impressive. These tires seemed to get up to speed quickly. They were quiet cruising down the highway, and then stopping as well seemed quick and easy. And when I say quick, I'm referring to having other tires of the same size. I've had just about every tire. I don't think I've had the Yokohamas yet in 255/85, but every other tire I've owned on different vehicles. And that additional diameter, which I do like because it gives you more ground clearance, it ends up acting like a leverage, right? When you're trying to get up to speed, there's a larger diameter thing that you need to get up to speed. And so that axle shaft has to turn something that's larger diameter, and therefore it's harder to get it going, and therefore it's harder to stop it. Additionally, if the tire weighs more, like our current set of Toyos, that weight is often concentrated in the belting, which would be the further outermost point of your tire. And if you've ever gone from a set of alloy wheels to steel wheels, in my experience, that usually is about an additional 10 pounds to go to steel wheels. I've noticed it's harder to get the truck up to speed and to stop it. You can feel a little sluggishness because, again, you're rotating and getting moving more weight. A wheel, on the other hand, though, is closer to the center of that diameter, right, of your wheel tire combo. So when you add a little bit of weight to a tire, in its build, it might be a tougher tire, but if you don't need that additional toughness, you're causing your truck to work harder to get up to speed and to brake. So these Coopers were good in all those ways. I felt like it was a really easy tire to get moving, to stop. Steering inputs were all very light. And I think a lot of that has to do with how lightweight it was. It's a little bit shorter for a 255, and it's a less aggressive tread compound. And that would have to do with the flotation and sand. Where the tire had its drawbacks to me are, we were in a lot of soil and some mud, and we were driving on some trails that were seldom used, so there was a lot of wet grass up in the Pacific Northwest, and every day, everything is pretty much wet in the morning up there with dew, and we found ourselves sliding around, sometimes on side hills, sometimes just doing, 10-point turns at the end of a tight trail, and as we did these and we would hit the brakes, the whole truck would slide and move, so that was sort of disconcerting. I think that the tread design not being that aggressive, and I think the aforementioned rubber compound possibly starting to dry out a little bit were to blame for that sliding. It wasn't horrible, but certainly this is not a mud terrain tire, and I think as this tire ages, every tire company's compound is different, and even within the same company, I won't mention a specific company by name, but a company I was able to talk to an engineer a few years ago, one generation of a certain all-terrain they made had a different compound, and they had trouble with it drying out much quicker and getting more brittle and then chunking than they did with their older tires or their newest generation. So they basically went with the wrong chemical makeup for a short time there, and their tires were known for chunking. And so they were able to correct that in the newest set. With these Coopers, I don't think it's a problem necessarily, but I do feel like their compound does dry out, and that's what we were seeing with the chunking. And additionally, I think that's what we were seeing with the lack of grip. We ended up with a hard rubber at the end of its useful life, and so it wasn't gripping on these soft surfaces as well as I had hoped it would. To me, I think it's a great tire. It's a great all-arounder, so to speak, great overlander tire. And I think if you're going to be in any sort of sand, most 255, 85, 16 tires are mud terrains. And so the Cooper sort of stands at the top of the heap for one of the most mild tires. The other one I can think of would be the Toyo M55. It looks like an all-terrain. My criticism of that tire would be that it's heavy and that it's quite an old design. So even Toyo will tell you their mud terrain is quieter than the Toyo M55, even though the M55 looks like a mild all-terrain. So to me, that just puts the Cooper up even higher for a do-it-all tire. We really had no issues. Like I said, we were off-roading 12 hours a day, 10 to 12, depending on how much we had in us to continue going in low range, using lockers occasionally. Every couple of days we'd end up using lockers, going through lava rock, sand dunes, some mud, lots of sort of muddy or wet, damp soil up in Oregon. And the tires did really, really well. So I'd have no hesitation buying them again. Comparing them directly to the next tire, that's usually the easiest because you take off a set of tires, put on a brand new set. Comparing them to the Toyo Mud Terrain 255, 85, 16s that we have now, they're definitely quicker to get up to speed, and I think that's due to the lower weight and smaller diameter. They're definitely better in the wet on pavement. I think the mud terrains are never that great, right? Because they have these large tread blocks without much siping. And definitely the Toyo is a far better mud terrain tire because it's pretty aggressive. The Toyo is also louder going down the highway. So I'm curious now if I were to throw a set of BF Goodrich KM3s or the Yokohamas on the truck, how they would compare to the Coopers. But I would have no reservations getting the Cooper Discovery ST Maxx with 2 X's again. So thanks for coming along. Hopefully that was somewhat helpful to you, rambling about tires. And if you like this one, let me know and I can do more random opinions and reviews of things that we've used in our travels. And if you have any specific questions or comments about that review, go ahead and put them below and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks.